100 people are still in shelters. But tragically, 21 people died, and that little boy we're still trying to find. Everybody I've talked to so far today just spontaneously brings that up. The fact is, Jill and I have him in our prayers, the family in our prayers, and all of you. While the situation is still treacherous, we're cautiously optimistic that
So the more and more lawmakers are just warning people of a recession this year. The Fed has already released multiple pieces of information on inflation. The economists and advocacy groups are just urging Congress every single day, it seems like, to protect another round of stimulus payments. At least until the crisis ends, they say. Recession fears are growing even as the households strained by inflation begin to find some relief. The dynamic captures what people are thinking about the American Rescue Plan and Joe Biden's stimulus check. The projections arrived days after the latest rate hike from the Fed, which sent the stock market tumbling. Persistent inflation had prompted the Fed to sustain ongoing rate hikes and imperil the economy. And rather than risk the deeply entrenched price increases that could prove more difficult to reverse, the longer the Fed takes an aggressive posture, the more likely that the economy will fall right into recession. What I'm saying is that a potential recession, everybody, will likely be mild, especially when the crisis compared to downturn 2 years ago, and especially when the Great Depression happened. But now, in 2023, still for those to put out of work by downturn, the effects would be very severe. At the center of the nation's economic problems is the ongoing bout of near-historic inflation. A government report last week revealed that inflation stood at 7% in November compared with the year prior, continuing a resolution decline from a 40-year record reached over the summer. We all know inflation remains at a level more than triple the Fed's target rate of 2%. In response, the Fed has continued a series of interest rate hikes, and the Fed is probably going to have to keep the interest rates elevated for a little bit longer. It makes it more difficult for households to borrow a car, or a mortgage, and it makes it more difficult for firms to borrow to take on new projects. For its part, the Fed already acknowledges that rate hikes will cause job losses, but they say they're just trying to avoid a recession from happening. But now, economists think the U.S. will likely avert a recession altogether. Some people are saying that, some people are not. The most important thing, though, is that the payments worth up to $1,000 from the state program will also be issued from the California residents by the end of today. California has just extended its inflation relief debit card remaining the time frame from 1 month, meaning that some eligible California taxpayers could be waiting until February to get paid. The last group of people in line to receive their prepaid debit cards of up to $1,000 will be those people who changed their address since filing the tax return, and the California Franchise Tax Board's new mailing time frame is now January 30th to February 14th. But here's what I'm going to say. The debit cards began rolling out in late October, everybody, and they were supposed to conclude January 14. According to the tax board spokesman, Andrew LePage, this change should only impact a small group of taxpayers. Majority of all payments, direct deposits, and debit cards will be issued on or by January 31st, and so the spokesman says that he has the majority of direct deposits. They were issued in November, and that another 500,000 payments should be processed by the end of the week. Recent data also reveals that fewer people were in poverty in California. That's good news, but the bad news is that this was due to only government relief programs, not to an improving economy, not to more job opportunities. The Public Policy Institute of California found that about 4.5 million Californians live in poverty, at or below $37,000 for a family of four. The program helping to lift people out of poverty included the federal EITC, the federal CTC credit, and other simple tools that people got in regards to stimulus. We have a ton of news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSI and SSDI. There's a ton of information about this fourth stimulus payment that you guys have to know. So continue watching, you don't want to miss out. Because right now, Joe Biden just announced a new update on federal loans. It's a growing number of lawmakers in Congress from both parties that support reinstating federal crisis relief programs, everybody, and direct deposits, and of course, monthly payments and monthly stimulus checks going to those in need.
Damage the homes, the businesses, and the farms and ranches. And we now know some of the destruction is going to take years to fully recover and rebuild. But we got to not just rebuild, we got to rebuild better. We got to rebuild better. Last week I signed an expedited major disaster declaration for the state of California. Yesterday, I directed the federal government that will cover 100% of the cost of removing debris and emergency measures like sheltering evacuees and paying overtime for first responders for the next 60 days. Excuse me, for 60 days. And right now, more than 500 employees of FEMA are out here and other federal agencies on the ground trying to help people. FEMA positions supplies for 100,000 meals, 100,000 liters of water, 20,000 blankets, 10,000 cots for shelters, and will be disaster recovery centers in every impacted area, including Santa Cruz and Merced, where survivors can apply for assistance and if their homes or their small businesses have been damaged. That's already underway. The Army Corps of Engineers is helping remove heavy debris and safely, and monitoring 7 reservoirs in the Central Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. I've instructed my administration to bring every element of the federal government together with the help of immediate
Social Security beneficiaries. Rising inflation also means more retirees will end up being taxed on their benefits, and when Congress introduced Social Security taxation in the 1980s, it set income thresholds and avoided indexing them for inflation. On the positive side of this, retirees whose costs are rising more slowly than the official inflation figures will benefit from the latest cost of living adjustments according to the U.S. Labor Department. And Bernie Sanders and Peter DeFazio have introduced the Social Security Expansion Act, which would, among other measures, boost benefits, adopt the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, and subject all income above $250,000 to the Social Security payroll tax. However, Democratic Representative John Larson has also proposed a Social Security reform bill. His bill adopts the CPI index for the elderly as the basis of the annual COLA and applies the payroll tax to annual wages above $400,000. Experts say that Larson's bill includes more benefit improvements than the DeFazio-Sanders bill, but DeFazio-Sanders extends solvency for significantly longer than the John Larson bill. Now everybody, officials are warning Americans of a global food shortage. The Biden administration is working to address several issues that the American people are currently facing. During the crisis, Americans across the country got a little extra help from stimulus checks, but for most of us, it's been a while since one has hit our bank accounts. And Georgia's governor recently signed Bill 1302, which is a new law attempting to offset the rising cost of inflation by refunding some money back into the hands of taxpayers. We've seen inflation hit the South pretty hard as housing and rental prices in southern cities continue to skyrocket on an upward trend, leaving some wondering if it's time to relocate. And the amount you receive will all depend on the marital status, dependent on how much and how filed your taxes to begin with. The payouts begin at $250 and go up from there. Georgia residents who are single or filed separately can expect to receive a payment of $250, but if he files the head of household, the refund will be $375. And then married